All right, let's just dive right into this explainer. Today, we're breaking down two massive, simultaneous breakthroughs that are quite literally reshaping human health as we know it in 2026. On one hand, we've got the weight loss drug wars hitting unprecedented clinical heights. And on the other hand, we're seeing a sudden and sweeping regulatory shift from the FDA regarding recovery peptides. So when you put these together, these two fronts are completely rewriting the rulebook on metabolic health, injury recovery, and longevity. Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. First, the new metabolic era. Then, tirzepatide beating semaglutide, followed by retatrutide, the triple agonist. After that, we'll look at the 2026 peptide reclassification, compounding versus the gray market, and finally, the future of therapeutics. Let's get right into it. Section 1. The new metabolic era. Section 2. Tirzepatide beats semaglutide. Okay, so the clinical data coming out right now is totally changing the game for metabolic health. Recently published in the New England Journal of Medicine, the Phase 3b SURMOUNT-5 trial finally pitted the two absolute heavyweights in obesity treatment against each other in a 72-week head-to-head. But look, the landscape is rapidly shifting way beyond just injections. We have to talk about what happened on December 22nd, 2025. The FDA officially approved oral Wegovy, a daily 25 milligram semaglutide pill. This was a massive milestone. The very first oral GLP-1 receptor agonist approved specifically for chronic weight management in adults with obesity or those overweight with a comorbidity. It uses this really unique snack absorption enhancer to overcome semaglutide's typical 1% oral bioavailability compared to the nearly 100% you get from an injection. Now, you do have to take it on an empty stomach with water, exactly 30 minutes before any food, drink, or other meds. But the upside? No needles and no cold chain storage, which means far broader patient acceptance globally, especially for needle-phobic patients. Plus, just like the injectable version did in the SELECT trial, oral Wegovy is expected to seek a cardiovascular indication soon. In the OASIS-1 trial, a 50 milligram dose of oral semaglutide showed a 15.1% weight loss at 68 weeks, compared to just 2.4% on placebo. That is incredibly close to the 15 to 17% you see with the 2.4 milligram injectable Wegovy. So with this booming landscape of new agents and oral formulations broadening access, the big question is, how does semaglutide's single GLP-1 action actually stack up against tirzepatide's dual action approach? Well, looking at the data from the SURMOUNT-5 trial, the statistical superiority is crystal clear. Tirzepatide didn't just edge out a win here, it kind of dominated. Patients on the dual-action tirzepatide experienced an average of 20.2% weight loss compared to injectable semaglutide's 13.7%. So what SURMOUNT-5 confirmed for us is that tirzepatide's dual-action mechanism translates to significantly deeper, more impactful metabolic shifts for the patient. Section 3. Retatrutide, the triple agonist. Now, you might be thinking, if two mechanisms are better than one, what on earth happens when you introduce three? Enter Eli Lilly's retatrutide. Unlike previous drugs, this is a first-in-class triple agonist. It's a single, highly engineered molecule that activates three totally separate hormone receptors simultaneously: GIP, GLP-1, and glucagon. By basically unlocking this third door, glucagon, the body gets a loud and clear signal to burn its stored energy at a vastly accelerated rate. And the results? They are absolutely staggering. In the Phase 3 TRIUMPH-4 trial, patients on the 12 milligram dose of retatrutide lost an astonishing average of 28.7% of their body weight over 68 weeks. Just to put that into real-world perspective, that's an average of 71 pounds per patient. It's wild. And because these specific patients also suffered from knee osteoarthritis, shedding that massive amount of weight led to a 75% reduction in their knee pain. In fact, over 1 in 8 patients became completely 100% pain-free. But as you can probably guess, pushing human biology to these extreme new limits doesn't happen without a little friction. While the weight loss was unbelievable, a new safety signal popped up. It's called dysesthesia. Essentially, it's an abnormal or painful sense of touch, where totally normal sensations suddenly feel super uncomfortable. In the trial, almost 21% of the folks on that highest 12 milligram dose reported this side effect, compared to basically zero on the placebo. Now, it was generally mild and very rarely caused people to actually drop out of the trial, but it definitely highlights the real-world trade-offs of using these hyper-powerful new molecules. So with all these pharmaceutical advancements making massive headlines and helping people shed huge amounts of weight, you really have to wonder, what exactly happens to the muscle? While we're shrinking fat, how is the industry evolving to repair the body, protect our lean tissue, and accelerate healing? Section 4. The 2026 peptide reclassification. That brings us to our second front. For years, recovery compounds like BPC 157 sort of lived in this regulatory gray zone. Let's look at the timeline. Back in 2023, the FDA heavily restricted access to these peptides, dumping them onto a Category 2 list. That meant compounding pharmacies couldn't legally make them anymore. But then, in a massive policy shift in February 2026, HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. announced that 14 major peptides would be moved back to a legal Category 1 status. The FDA formally updated their list in April of that year, officially setting the stage for some highly anticipated public hearings. That April 2026 FDA update confirmed that these specific peptides, we're talking about the famous recovery compound BPC-157, the tissue-repairing TB-500, and even metabolic optimizers like MOTS-C, are all heading to public advisory hearings this July. The Pharmacy Compounding Advisory Committee is going to review all the clinical evidence, and their findings will heavily shape the long-term legal access for patients. Make no mistake, this is a monumental shift for anyone interested in recovery and human performance.
Section 5. Compounding vs. Gray market.
This whole regulatory reversal is a huge deal because it fundamentally shifts the industry away from some incredibly risky, unregulated avenues. You see, when peptides got restricted, a lot of people turned to the gray market of online research chemicals. And as they discussed recently on the Andrew Huberman podcast, those gray market peptides carry severe risks of contamination with lipopolysaccharides, or LPS. Those are basically impurities that can trigger dangerous systemic immune responses. Category 1 compounding pharmacies, on the other hand, provide physician-supervised, rigorously tested therapeutics. So this reclassification, it solves a massive safety issue for patients. And honestly, here's where these two revolutionary fronts really collide. Speaking with Dr. Huberman, Dr. Craig Conover pointed out how regulated compounding pharmacies allow doctors to create custom microdoses of drugs like tirzepatide. By carefully controlling that dose, and maybe combining it with growth hormone-releasing peptides like sermorelin, doctors can help their patients shed the fat while actively avoiding excessive muscle loss and keeping away that dreaded Ozempic face. But understanding the mechanics of how to legally access these is absolutely critical. You have to remember, Category 1 reclassification doesn't magically mean these peptides are FDA-approved prescription drugs. They are still off-label therapeutics. It simply opens up a safe, legal 4-step pathway. First, find a prescribing physician. Second, get your baseline blood work done. Third, receive a legitimate prescription based on those labs. And fourth, have it filled by a licensed 503A or 503B compounding pharmacy. Section 6. The future of therapeutics. So, as the legal landscape finally stabilizes, how are patients actually going to use all these tools? Well, physicians are already discovering some fascinating optimal protocols. For instance, it turns out BPC-157 often works best systemically via a tiny subcutaneous injection, rather than having to inject it right at the site of an injury. We also have peptides like tesamorelin, which is actually already FDA approved to specifically target visceral fat. Then there's ipamorelin, which safely stimulates natural growth hormone release without spiking your cortisol. But for sure, the most exciting part is the rise of hybrid protocols. This is where you combine the massive fat-burning power of GLP-1s with the muscle-preserving power of these therapeutic peptides. It's kind of the holy grail of metabolic optimization. So here's the crucial point I want to leave you with today. We are currently standing right at the intersection of two huge leaps forward in medical science. With Big Pharma redefining weight loss and the FDA reopening the door to compounding recovery peptides, these two fronts of medical innovation are powerfully converging in 2026. The tools we have to transform our bodies and heal our injuries have literally never been more potent. So the real question is, how will you navigate this new landscape of human optimization? Are we entering an era where biological decline just becomes optional? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.